Okay, speech for Jamie Mesta. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 adults and the big brown dog. Here today to talk to you about the death penalty. The death penalty is a very hot topic in the United States. The death penalty does not deter crime in any way, shape, or form. That's how I'd like to start this off. Basically, the death penalty is only equal in controversy to abortion. Normally, quiet and reserved people get very hot and very, very passionate about these two subjects. And quite often, you have someone who is completely against abortion, totally right to life, but they're for the death penalty. I don't understand that. However, I am totally against the death penalty, but I think abortion should be legal. And I think there's some really good reasons for both. And we're just going to concentrate on the death penalty today. I think in American society, this is the 21st century, still using the death penalty is absolutely outrageous. It goes against everything this country is supposed to stand for. It's just a form of vengeance. And it really doesn't help anybody. Since the 1960s, the European Union member states have all abolished the death penalty from their laws. These countries are much less violent than America. Their prisons are less violent. It's just different. I think it's something to think about. A little bit of the history of the death penalty. I was fascinated to find out that the first American, or the first person in the Americas executed was right here, 10 minutes from here, in the Jamestown colony. Captain George Kendall, in 1608, was executed for treason. He was fined for Spain. So that kind of really hit close to home, being that it is right close to home. As far back as 1777, Thomas Jefferson thought that Virginia should only use the death penalty for reasons of treason and murder. In 1797, Ben Franklin's friend, an abolitionist, wrote that the punishment of murder by death is contrary to reason and to the order and happiness of society, and contrary to divine revelation. And I have to say that over 200 years later, I really agree with that. I think it's well said. So in my eyes, there are very few arguments for the death penalty. Most people who are for it say that they believe it is justice. I really think that it's just a form of vengeance. Some who watch a killer put to death, or who know that their loved one's killer was put to death, say that it brings them peace. The one case that I found that I thought was most telling was Kathleen Trainer, who witnessed Timothy McVeigh's execution. Her daughter was one that was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing nursery. And she said that it's a demarcation point. It's a period at the end of a sentence. It's the completion of justice, and that's what I'll remember today. But she saw that man put to death. Maybe I would feel differently if I knew someone who was put to death, or who had been murdered, but I don't see how watching their murderer put to death brings you peace. I would be tortured by that. That's what I would see. It's also such a long process to get there. You're continually living within that pain. And then when that's over, then what? I just don't think it makes sense. I really, also think that one of the most important parts of that is that Timothy McVeigh wanted the death penalty. He didn't want to spend his life in jail suffering. And we granted him his final wish. I don't see how that makes sense. He did not deserve that. So there are many more arguments against the death penalty. One of the biggest factors is cost. It has been proven that in every single state that has ever had the death penalty, it costs more to put that person to death or keep them on death row than it would to keep them in jail for the rest of their lives. Two states have, in the last few years, Jersey and New Mexico, have both abolished the death penalty, with cost being one of the main factors. Now, the reason that it costs so much, there's special housing. There's special guards, there's the number of guards required, then there's all the court time, the judges' salaries, the court clerks, the defense attorneys that are almost always public appointed because there are mandatory appeals. The system doesn't even believe itself, and that's why there are mandatory appeals. It doesn't make sense, and it just goes on and costs a fortune. Then, in my eyes, it's just not harsh enough. Death penalty, inmates get private cells. They get extra privileges because they get to talk to their lawyers more, they get more phone calls, they are actually living pretty nicely in their cells, and they're not subject to some of the other violence that prison actually holds. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was not sentenced to death. He was put in jail and put in general population. And he was dead within under 2 years, I believe. That's because jail justice got him. I personally don't have a problem with that. I think that was much more fair. Then, in most cases of the death penalty, you're getting a lethal injection. Well, that's what you do to your pets when they need to go to heaven. That's something that I wish, if I was suffering a horrible disease, that I could have. Please put me to sleep. But good, upstanding citizens are made to suffer and deal with horrible cancers and horrible, horrible illnesses. They can't be put to sleep. They can't request that. Why should we give that to the worst of the worst? That's just too good for them, I think. I would like to see them suffer in jail. I don't know if any of you watch MSNBC, Lockup, Raw on Saturday nights. All over this country, there are people screaming and yelling that prison is the worst thing in the world. They're kept in cages. They're treated like animals. They're all going crazy. I personally feel that that's a pretty good punishment for most of the people that are in there. That's exactly what they deserve. A lifetime of suffering, a lifetime of being alone, of fighting for your life, of feeling like an animal in a cage. Well, if you're a murderer, you truly deserve something like that. You know, and then there's the case of your family and friends. You know, people think that it's cushy. Oh, your friends come visit you. After a number of years, nobody comes to see you anymore. They move away. They stop sending money. You are then left to really, truly suffer alone. And again, I think that's very fitting for most murderers. So when you think about it, putting someone in jail for life versus the death penalty, you're really making them suffer more. And yet, if they're in jail, yet it does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment. It really doesn't. A simple jail cell shared with somebody else, that's not cruel and unusual. That's normal and that's accepted punishment throughout society, throughout the world. But to give somebody the death penalty and let them just mess with the system and keep this thing going and make the people who suffered from their crimes suffer longer and longer, and it just doesn't make sense. I don't think it should be a part of America in the 21st century, and I really think it needs to go away. And I hope that people will think about that, and the next time you go to vote, what do you really want? Do you want your murderers to suffer? No parole? Just in a jail cell? Or do you want to give them what they want? To not suffer and to just go to sleep. Thank you.